Up until the middle of the 20th century, both Britain and France commanded large empires in parts of the Old World. However, in the early 1900s, nationalist sentiment began to strongly resist colonial rule, resulting in the end of British rule of India in 1947 and the end of French rule of Algeria in 1962. The primary resistance organization in India was the Indian National Congress, a political party founded in 1885 with the goal of giving educated Indians a greater role in government. It grew to become the dominant organized independence group, bringing together millions of Indians of all different religions, cultures, and classes. The fight for independence was mostly an elitist movement until the involvement of Mohandas Gandhi, who became the leader of the Congress in 1915. Gandhi brought with him his idea of satyagraha, or truth force, a method he used to great effect in his resistance of the British. He explained it like this.
Truth satya implies love, and firmness agraha engenders and therefore serves as a synonym for force. I thus began to call the Indian movement satyagraha, that is to say, the force which is born of truth and love or non-violence, and gave up the use of the phrase passive resistance in connection with it. So much so that even in English writing we often avoided it and used instead the word satyagraha itself for some other equivalent English phrase.
Satyagraha was to be more than passive resistance, but strength in non-violence, as demonstrated by Salt March in 1930, where he and many followers marched to the Indian coast and illegally made salt from seawater, rebelling against the British salt tax. Along with the Quit India movement of 1942, which called for civil disobedience, Gandhi's message of Satyagraha united the Indian people against British rule. In Algeria, the National Liberation Front, or FLN, was the major resistance organization. It was formed from multiple smaller independence groups on November 1, 1954, when the resistance attacked multiple military and police targets. The attacks were together known as Toussaint Rouge, and with them began the long war for Algerian independence. During the Algerian War, both the FLN and French army committed atrocities. The FLN fought using guerrilla tactics and instilled terror in civilians by their use of ambushes, night raids, beheadings, and more. Any person that did not support them was a potential target to their violence. On the other hand, the French were also ruthless in the war, using torture, aerial bombings, and napalm against the resistance. Pierre Deschemaker, a Catholic priest sent to Algeria, describes the scene after a battle.
In the evening I saw the body of an Algerian which had been left in the street by the French army. I was deeply shocked to see that the body was still there 4 or 5 hours after the fighting. It was obvious that it had been left there to inspire fear and terror in the Algerian population.
Algerian civilians also suffered at the hands of the French. Whole villages suspected of supporting the FLN were collectively held responsible, and millions of Algerians were displaced from their homes to military camps or open plains, where re-establishing their economies and cultures was difficult. The diplomatic end of the British Raj in India was relatively straightforward, as the Indian Independence Act of 1947 was quickly passed through the British Parliament. The Act partitioned British India into 2 new states, the Union of India and Dominion of Pakistan, but due to the suddenness with which the land was divided, violence and conflicts ensued as Indian Hindus and Muslims scrambled to move to their respective states. About 15 million people in total crossed borders, and due to the ineffectiveness of new governments, many immigrants were killed, with some estimates reaching 1 million deaths. In comparison, the end of French rule in Algeria was more complicated. France itself faced political issues as the Fourth Republic collapsed in 1958 when the popular Charles de Gaulle came to power, officially becoming the president of the Fifth Republic in 1959. De Gaulle promised to support French citizens in Algeria, called Pieds Noirs, but changed his position when a referendum held in 1961 showed that the majority of voters were in support of an independent Algeria. Soon after, the Evian Accords of 1962 were signed, calling for Algerian self-determination. Some French saw this as a betrayal on de Gaulle's part, and the Organization of the Secret Army, or the OAS, formed in opposition to him. Though the OAS tried to disrupt the process of liberation with bombings and attempted assassinations of the president, a second referendum held in 1962 almost unanimously voted to let Algeria be independent. Resulting from independence was a massive migration of Pieds Noirs and pro-French Muslims as they all fled for France. Many that did not leave were killed, and even those that did move to France were not particularly welcomed. In summary, the decolonization of India and Algeria took very different paths. Though both involved strong national sentiment overpowering a colonial empire, the methods used could not have been more contrasting, and we're left to reflect on their effectiveness. How would the Indian resistance have gone if there had been no strong leadership? And was the violence in Algeria really necessary for victory? History tells us that there are multiple ways to reach a goal, but we as individuals can decide which actions deserve applause and which deserve to be left in the past.